I've experienced a couple of seasons of anxiety and depression, and one of them was debilitating, and it went for maybe 3 or 4 months solid. And that was during my years in New York, and lost a lot of weight, and just very difficult to get out of bed, afraid of the nighttime because I couldn't go to sleep, had insomnia, even sleeping pills wouldn't put me to sleep, and then I was afraid of the day because of having to face anxiety. And looking back on that, I don't know what God was up to during that season. Except that I just know by faith that God does sometimes break us down in order to build us up. And I think the retrospect of that season in my life is quite clear, because God has used that story as I've told it publicly, as I've written about it in blogs and books, as I've preached, included that part of my story in my preaching. It has opened up opportunity and for other people to come out of, I guess, hiding with their own stories. I remember a particular anecdote from our church. I'd been pastor there at Christ Presbyterian in Nashville for 3 years, and this was the first time in a sermon that I shared that experience with our congregation. And an older gentleman in the church came up to me, and I'll never forget this conversation. He said, Scott, I think you're a gifted communicator, but I just want you to know I'm entirely unimpressed by that fact. Today, when you disclosed your own weakness like that to us, today is the day that you became my pastor, because today's the day that you demonstrated that you are more like me than you are different than me. And so I think it's just one testimony of the kinds of things that Paul both said and did about, putting his weakness on display, talking about his coveting in Romans 7, and of course his, masterful, self-disclosure of how the gospel had impacted him, the chief of sinners, and yet the chief example of the mercy of God, all in the same sentence followed by a doxology. And so I think it's a great picture, Paul especially, and in our own stories of how our weakness appropriately shared, not indulgently shared, but appropriately shared, to point to Jesus and not to point to us, can bring glory to God and give courage to other people to seek encouragement.